This is a special call budget workshop regarding the FY 2023-2024 budget. If we can have the presenters to please come forward. Good.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners, and Henry County community. My name is Bernita Campbell, Budget Director for Henry County. Today, we will have our FY24 budget workshop. Today's meeting is for informational purposes only. The board will not be asked to take any action today. The workshop will be an overview of the annual general fund budget requests submitted and presented by each county department back in February. As you may recall, each commissioner received an invitation to these meetings, which were held over a 3-day time period, where the requests and needs were discussed. A copy of the presentation, as well as responses to commissioner questions posed during these departmental meetings, have been provided to each of you and are on the dais for your review and reference. As a reminder, for today's presentation, you will not hear any departmental requests or presentations. You will only hear a summary and the related budget recommendations to be submitted for your review and approval by May 31st. I ask that you allow me to complete the presentation. Once I have concluded, I will address any questions that you may have. Each year, we go through a budget cycle that guides our process for budget review and recommendations that ultimately lead to an approved general fund budget. Beginning in the January-February timeframe, after most tax revenues have been received, the budget team begins projecting general fund revenue for the upcoming fiscal year. Also in February, we began communications with departments to find out departmental objectives and board priorities. Once we have the departmental objectives and the departmental requests, we take a closer look at the request in comparison to current and historical spending trends over the last 2 to 3 years. During March and April, the budget and finance teams attend meetings with county leadership to determine priorities and initiatives for the upcoming year. February through April, our time is spent aligning the projected available funds to the identified budgetary priorities. By May 31st of each year, commissioners vote to adopt an approved budget for each department. July, the new fiscal year begins. Monthly, the departmental budgets are monitored by the budget team to ensure that we are staying within budget both for revenue collections and expenses. There are 4 fund types in any governmental entity: the general fund, special revenue funds, capital projects funds, and debt service funds. Today's presentation will be focused on the general fund. The general fund is very important as this is the fund that accounts for the daily operations of county business. This fund is primarily funded by local property and sales tax collections. This year, in partnership with the county manager and the Board of Commissioners chairwoman, the following fund uses were identified, and the uses have been separated into board priorities and departmental countywide needs. The 3 board priorities identified are class and comp implementation, pension funding, and absorbing health insurance increases so that employees don't have to take on these additional costs. The departmental countywide needs identified were the medical and food contract increases for the jail, countywide technology contract increases, and court reporter and state contracted attorney fees. The focus of this year's budget was to maintain key programs and service levels without increasing staffing levels, in addition to implementation of the class and comp plan, which is a board initiative that is important to both the board and county employees. The proposed FY24 general fund budget is $232 million, up from $216.9 million in FY23. This is a 7% year-over-year increase. Preliminary projections for year-over-year digest growth suggest growth between 11 to 14%. While we know that there are several other departmental needs that exist that we were unable to address in this budget, specifically adding additional personnel, we are committed to revisiting those requests at a later time in FY24. This will allow the team an opportunity to implement the class and comp plan, determine if changes in pay help our recruitment and retention efforts, as well as an opportunity to ensure that our revenue collections are coming in as expected. Some of the key budget highlights: we are addressing some of the needs of the county's greatest asset, its employees. To remind you, the class and comp implementation, pension funding, and the county assuming the health insurance cost. The second highlight is we have a balanced budget without increasing the millage rate or use of fund balance. Simply stated, we are being good stewards of the available resources and focusing on county priorities and must-haves versus putting our resources towards wants. The final highlight for this budget: we are supporting community organizations that are doing important work throughout Henry County. Some of the supported organizations this year are the Boys and Girls Club, A Friend's House, Haven House, and the Henry County Library System. Some of the revenue assumptions that are included in this budget: again, the budget is based upon the current millage rate of 12.733. We're assuming a 9% year-over-year growth in our property tax revenue and a 3.5% year-over-year growth for sales tax revenue. Some of the major expenditure items included in the budget: again, under human resources, we have our class and comp funding at $10.3 million, our pension funding at $1.7 million. Under general government, we have our countywide software maintenance contracts, $660,000, elections funding, $306,000 to cover additional voting equipment and the transportation of that equipment. Public safety, we have the medical and food contract increases for the jail at $1.8 million. EMA disaster response expenses, $134,000. And for judicial services, we have our court reporter increases and our state employee contract increases for the public defender. Shown on the screen now is the FY24 budget summary. Again, this is based on our current millage rate of 12.733. We are projecting our general fund revenues to be $232 million. Our FY23 baseline budget, removing any one-time expenses, is $214 million. Funding for the class and comp plan, pension increases, and insurance increases total $12.5 million, leaving our departmental requests total at $12.8 million. So I'm referring to what's in the original request column, the first column that's on the slide. So as you can see, our overall total expenses that were requested was $239.2 million. And based upon our projected revenue of $232 million, if all of those requested expenses were funded, we would have a use of fund balance of $7.2 million. So the budget team, knowing that we were constrained by the 12.733 mills for our millage rate, we wanted to work within our means and not request an increase to the millage rate. So once we factor in the projected revenue and funding the FY24 board priorities, we were able to fund $5.6 million of departmental requests. So as you can see here, the bulk of the requests are coming from public safety. That represents 50% of the overall requested increases. The second category is from general government, which represents 25%, and that covers our countywide contracts and our elections expenses. So just to give you a graphical representation of the budget recommendations by cluster, again, public safety represents 51% of those requests at $2.8 million, followed by general government at 25.3%, which is $1.4 million. And as you can see, all of the other requests are fairly small in comparison to those two. This is a graphical representation of our revenue sources. So again, as you can see, the red highlight of the pie is our property taxes. That's our largest source of revenue, representing 54.1% of our general fund revenue at $125.6 million. Our second major source of revenue for the general fund is our sales and use taxes at $73.3 million, or 31.6%. So I would like to conclude, in accordance with Henry County ordinances, we must have an annual adopted budget by May 31st. Therefore, the proposed timeline is as follows. By March 30th, we are requesting that the BOC notify the budget team if there are any changes to the current budget recommendation. On April 12th, the BOC will advertise notice of the public hearings in the Henry Herald. On April 15th, the BOC will advertise the FY24 budget summary in the Henry Herald. On May 2nd at 9 a.m., we will hold our first public budget hearing. May 16th at 6:30, we will hold our second and final public budget hearing. At that time, the BOC will be asked to vote to adopt the final FY24 budget. This concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Benita. Commissioner Wilson, do you have any questions?
Not at this time, no, ma'am.
Okay. Mr. Ames?
Not at the moment. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Commissioner Lewis?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Thomas?
I do have a question, but I will, under public safety, is that all of public safety, or is that just for one division of it? Is that all of public safety that you put in that figure there?
So let me go back. Yes, ma'am, Commissioner
Police,
Thomas.
fire, 911,
Yes, ma'am.
everybody that's
Yes, ma'am.
listed under public safety?
Yes, ma'am.
And, I'm sorry, on the judicial system here, is that just for judges in their department, or does that covers the DA office as well?
Yes, ma'am, that includes all of the courts, the judges, the DA, as well as the solicitor.
Okay. Everything else I'll do as you requested, put it in writing by the deadline and get it to you. So thank you very much.
Okay.
So I just wanted to ask the question. So we had departments that put in that made several requests. And because of the way the budget their budgets are trending, is that why certain things were funded and certain things were not funded?
Yes, ma'am. So we looked at the current trends as a part of our process. We always look at the current trends to see how your historical trends, how your historical spending pattern has been for the last 2 to 3 years, as well as how you're trending currently. And if you're currently on track to stay within your budget and you don't have any new programs coming online, our recommendation was not to add any additional dollars to the budget for those particular departments, as we felt like they could handle them with the current budget that they already have.
So the departments that were given the increases were expenses that were due to certain increases.
So,
I know for like the jail, for example, I know that their contract, a renewal of their contracts, there was an increase in medical costs. I know that the meals went from $125 to $150. So there was food costs that were incurred. So I know that we had some departments that due to the increase in postage and various dues and association fees, even for the BOC. Our dues with ARC increased. So those are the areas that you funded.
Yes, ma'am. So we tried to address any contract increases that we were required to fund. So that's primarily what this budget includes. Contract increases or any new programs that came online that required funding.
And so when we look at the mid-year budget adjustments, what will we be able to determine from that?
So we want to take a look at where we are as far as revenue collections. We will have a better idea of where our revenue is going to come in for the year around the December-January timeframe. And at that time, that's when we would like to revisit any personnel requests that were submitted in February for our FY24 budget and to see if we can fund them at that time.
Go ahead, Commissioner Amos.
So, under line item 4, and we may talk about this more in our meeting later, the $10,304,000 that's listed there on the implementation cost that we've got presented in our regular meeting this evening is actually $8,587,000, which is about 8.6%. So I guess what is that percentage we're looking at based off this budget?
So the 10.3 that's represented here includes the taxes. The 8.6 million that you have in your packet that you're going to discuss later on this afternoon, that's just the salary cost. So we have to consider the taxes as well.
Thank you.
Another question, in this budget, you gave a little information about personnel. Does this budget include personnel requests or not?
No, ma'am. So in the original request,
Personnel requests included in this budget.
so in the original request, it includes about $4.1 million of requests, but we've requested the departments to hold off on any personnel requests until we get to the mid-year point of the budget to ensure that our collections are coming in as we expected, and then we will readdress the personnel requests at that time.
You also asked some departments to reduce their budgets by 5%, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So where's that 5% going to be redirected to?
So most departments did not submit a 5% reduction, so that is not included in the recommendation that's on the screen, and that has been shared with you. Most departments did not have the 5% of savings to give up, so that's not reflected anywhere in the recommendation.
So there's no 5% reduction in this presentation?
There's no 5% reduction.
I know there are going to be some personnel requests even in public safety because of the growth factor in Henry County. Are you asking them to wait as well to mid-year?
Yes, ma'am, because there are currently vacancies on the books, so we have asked all departments to please fill the vacancies first, at which time at mid-year we will revisit any personnel needs at that time based upon where we see ourselves ending FY24. So there are vacancies, so if there are immediate needs, they can fill those vacancies because those vacancies are a part of our baseline budget. But we're just saying any additional requests that are not already on the books, those are the ones we're asking the departments to hold off on.
Can you tell us how many vacancies in totality from all of the departments that we have?
I think it's 239 vacancies.
So we got 239 vacancies that we're carrying on the books. Commissioner Lewis?
Yes, I had a question. So if we're moving, or say we're asking the departments to hold off until mid-year as far as the extra personnel requests, so if they do present those requests mid-year, we're waiting to see how much money we've collected just to ensure that we're able to handle those requests.
Correct.
So we wouldn't have to dip into fund balance to do that. So I guess
Well, we
explain that
want to
some.
make sure that our revenue is coming in as expected. We want to see how they're able to fill the current vacancies that they already have.
Right.
And we also want to see how our class and comp plan, if that's being beneficial to us, like
Gotcha.
as far as recruiting and retaining employees.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Johnny, did you have a question? You good? So I would ask that if there are any additional questions or concerns or items that the commissioners would like to address, please get those items to Benita and David by the 30th. If there are no further questions, meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.